Hi, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm Chris, and on this show, we break down podcast audio production. I give you techniques and tricks and also a lot of knowledge so that you can produce better audio for your podcasts. This show is for regular podcasters, but it's also for podcast producers. And that's what I teach at my school, Podcast Engineering School. I have a whole program teaching professional podcast production. But this episode is 8 lessons in producing podcast audio really well. So let's just jump right into it. The first concept is upward compression. Okay, well, we all know regular compression is when the audio level gets loud, when it peaks, the compressor can compress those peaks down and it sort of tames the dynamic range. And that's good. And that's what we call compression. Now, upward compression is almost the opposite. It's when the compressor will take the lower volume parts of the audio and raise them up. And by the way, and both are good, and both work toward making the dynamic range smaller. And that's always good for the listeners. When you take raw audio is way too dynamic, typically speaking. So using a compressor or using upward compression or using both it compresses the dynamic range and it provides a better listening experience to the listeners. So that's why we use compression, and this is upward compression. There's a cool FabFilter video here. FabFilter is one of the compressor. The FabFilter compressor is one that where you can use upward compression. Most compressors don't they don't have a way to let you do upward compression, by the way. But you can also use things like Vocal Rider and stuff, which it can do a similar thing. So yeah, I will link to this video from FabFilter on upward compression. You could check that out if you want to. Next one, is it necessary to tweak the sound of royalty-free music tracks or stock music? So a lot of podcasts, for their intro music, they'll go to some of these websites that sell royalty-free music. And it's great. You pay $30 or $40, you get a nice music track that you like, and you can use it as your intro music forever. And you don't have to pay any more. It's royalty-free. So it's great. One thing you have to know, though, about this royalty-free music is typically it has been mastered, which means it's been compressed more, probably limited more, and also EQ'd more. And usually a lot of brightness has been added to it. So when you use your royalty-free music in your podcast episodes, keep in mind you might want to adjust the EQ of that music. Just because it's been mastered doesn't mean the EQ is perfect, and it also doesn't mean that EQ works with your episodes. So if you need to add a little more low end, just a little, do it. If you need to reduce some of the high end, some of the sharpness, then you can do it. And what you're really doing is blending that intro music with the voices in your podcast, right? So keep in mind, you can always tweak royalty-free music tracks. The next one, want to approach potential clients, but you have a fear of rejection? Yeah. So if you're looking to build a production business, that's great. There's so much work out there. I encourage everyone who wants to do that, do it. And I also have a short course on this. It's called Getting New Clients at Higher Rates. I'll talk about that more later, but I'll break down the gist of all this. You just have to talk to a lot of people. And when I say talk to people, I don't mean try to sell a lot of people. Just talk to people. Just introduce yourself that you're a podcast producer. That's all. If you just walk around introducing yourself as a podcast producer every day or online, you just keep approaching people just gently. You're not selling. Don't pressure anybody. Just introduce yourself. If you do that, you'll get a bunch of clients eventually. You really will. And there's also this book here that I read called Rejection Proof. And this is a great book. If you're afraid of rejection, this is like literally top 3 books of all time for me. And I'm not saying I've put it into practice yet either, but this is great because our success really comes down to just getting out there and doing it. And a lot of us are afraid of failure, and we're afraid to ask for things that we want, and we're just afraid to approach things head on. And so this book really, he does 100 days of rejection where every day he just does some ridiculous thing. And here's the thing, he asks for these ridiculous things, but every now and then someone says yes. And that's the whole reason for doing it, right? All right, let's move on. This is pretty cool. Look at this picture. By the way, I'm recording this in video also. So if you go to the YouTube channel for Podcast Engineering School, you could see the video of this. I mean, listening to the audio is good too, because I'm not showing too much visual stuff. But here's a picture in nature of these two huge megaphones where people can lay in between there and basically listen to nature. This is part of the Paani Nature Center and was made by the students of the Estonian Academy of Arts. And again, I'll link to this, but pretty cool. Imagine laying there and having the nature sounds like funneled into your ear like that. That's pretty cool. Anyway, that's why I wanted to show you. Next post. By the way, these are all, I don't know if I mentioned it, these are all blog posts on podcastengineeringschool.com. And I used to have an email list called the Daily Goody email list, but I'm not doing that anymore because I haven't written new Daily Goodies in a while. But all right, so the next one here, can some particular microphones exacerbate sibilance? And the answer is yes. And when it comes to sibilance and microphones, the person's voice is also the other main character in this story. So there's one person's individual voice, and then there's the microphone they're speaking into. There's the character of that microphone they're speaking into. And those two things, the person's voice, the character of the person's voice, and the character of the microphone, they combine to create a sound. And sometimes a person will have sibilance. You know, the S's and T's and the K's, the sibilance will be sharp. And some people don't have bad sibilance, right? And then, of course, with microphones, some microphones like the Shure SM7B are a darker microphone. They don't pick up in the sibilance range, which, by the way, is from around 5 kilohertz up to about 9 or 10 kilohertz. And it can go a little lower, it can go a little higher. It just depends on the person. But that's the range of sibilance. So some microphones like the SM7B are a little darker on the top end. They're not as bright. So even if you have sibilance, it won't be exacerbated by the SM7B. Now, in contrast to that, most condenser microphones are very sharp and very clear in the high frequencies. So if someone has bad sibilance from their mouth and they speak into a condenser mic, well, now that sibilance is going to really be exacerbated and it's going to come through. So, that's why I always advise, if you're going to buy a microphone, try 2 or 3 microphones or 4 or 5 microphones if you can, and just see which one works best with your voice. And but of course, if you do have a mic and a voice and you get sibilance in the end in the recordings, you can always use a de-esser to remove the sibilance. Just remember, be careful with de-essers. You don't want to overdo it because that will ruin the voice, and you don't want to ruin it. Okay, next post, podcast editing, a chore or labor of love? Yeah, so when it comes to, editing your podcast, let's say you're the podcaster and you just record your own show and edit your own show. Do you love it or do you not love it? Or are you, sort of ambivalent? Of course, podcast editors and producers, we do this all day. We edit podcasts, and so we get used to it and we can just plow through the work and whatever. Some episodes are easier to edit than others. But if you're just a regular podcaster, if you don't love editing, that's okay. Just get in a routine, a simple production routine of editing, and then just get better. Just keep trying to do it faster and faster, and you'll really speed up. You'd be surprised how fast you can edit if you get in a habit. It's all about habit. So just get in a good habit and keep your production workflow simple, and then you can get through the editing pretty quick if you don't like it. If you do like it, then, you can sort of do it at a normal pace and make it sound really good if you want. Always helps. Or if you're Josh Wade, then you don't edit. Right, Josh? He said, I don't edit. Josh. All right, next post. Are your podcast episodes loud enough? Yeah, are they loud enough? Well, from listening to podcasts, when you're listening to a podcast in your podcast app and you listen to your favorite show and you listen to your second favorite show and then you try a new show and all of a sudden the volume is way lower and you're like, oh, that's weird. So then you have to crank up the volume on your phone and then you listen to the episode. Then you go back to your favorite show because they have a new episode and you press play and it's louder than God and you get your ears blown out. So in podcasting, there are loudness standards. Now they are unofficial standards, but if we all have our podcasts at around the same volume, that works out really well for the listeners because they get a good listening experience from all podcasts. So the standards are for mono, it's minus 19 LUFS, and for stereo, it's minus 16 LUFS. And so you need to have a way at the very end of your production process, pretty much the last step, you need to adjust that overall volume to the industry standard. And so I use iZotope RX to do that. Many people use Auphonic. Others try to look at the meter in their DAW and guesstimate the LUFS level. I do not recommend that way of doing it. And also some DAWs will allow you to set the LUFS level. Adobe Audition lets you use the match loudness to put it precisely at your desired LUFS level. And I'm sure there are other ways, but this is not something to be overlooked. When amateurs overlook this and they put out their show and the volume is very low, that's not good. And it's not hard to put it at the right loudness level. It's not hard. It's very easy. It takes like 30 seconds, if that. So, all right, next post. I think this is the last one. Yeah, independent podcast editors and producers. Are you profiting enough? Okay, if you're producing podcasts for other people or you're editing podcasts for clients or, you're engineering podcasts for clients, if you have clients, are you making enough money? It's one thing to have some clients, that's fine. But in the end, if it's a business venture, you have to look at how much you're earning. And are you earning enough? And if you're not earning enough, you can figure out how to earn more. One of the ways to earn more is to learn to be a more professional podcast editor and producer. And then you can go after clients who have more money and you can make quite a bit more money once you're a trained professional. And so that's one way to do it. And also I have, like I mentioned before, I have the smaller course, Getting New Clients at Higher Rates. It's a course for independent podcast editors and producers. And this is on the website and I will link to everything. But that's it for today. Those are the lessons I wanted to cover and I wanted to cover them quickly. So to not take up too much of your time, but thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to check out podcastengineeringschool.com. The next semester of PES, and maybe I should show that, right? But the next semester of PES starts on February 20th. February 20th is the next semester of PES. Go to the website for more information. Thanks again. I'll talk to you guys soon. All right, bye.